Good evening, everyone. We are now in Second Kings chapter 18. Second Kings chapter 18 is a very important chapter in the history of the kings, particularly the southern king. Now, in this chapter, we will recall the downfall of the northern kingdom and at the time where Hezekiah would be reigning in the south. Verse 1 says this, and then it came about in the third year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, the king of Israel, that Hezekiah or Hitzkiah or Hitzkiyahu, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, became king. So allow me just to draw out the timeline again. You can see the king before Hoshea is Pekah. Hoshea actually reigned what we call in a dual form. The first 9 years of the reign of Hoshea, right here, the first 9 years was a vassal king to the king of Assyria. And when they fought against the king of Assyria and refused to pay tribute, the second 9 years is what Hoshea reigned as an independent king. And in the third year of that ninth year, you find that Hezekiah had became king, and Ahaz, the father of Hezekiah, would have passed on from there. Now, one of the things you see is this would be Hezekiah, right here, the son of Ahaz, right here. The king of Judah became king at this point in time, in the third year of Hoshea. We will be spending a little bit more time in the details of chapter 18, and so we will break chapter 18 into two parts. The second part for tomorrow. Verse 2. This chapter introduces us the king Hezekiah or Hitzkiah or Hitzkiyahu. Hezekiah, as we call him in the English, was 25 years old when he became king. And he reigned for 29 years in Jerusalem, Jerusalem being the capital of Judah. And we are now told that his mother's name was Avi, the daughter of Zechariah. Now, many people think that Zechariah would be the prophet Zechariah, the son of Berechiah. And then you would find that Hezekiah would be a grandson of Zechariah, which tells us that he comes from a pretty interesting background. I want us to pay attention in the next few verses, and it brings out the character of Hezekiah, who is one of the most prominent and one of the most successful kings in the history of Israel and Judah. In verse 3, we are now told he did what was right in the eyes of Jehovah, in accordance with everything that his father David had done. This is the first verse that gives us a glimpse of the character of Hezekiah. So we see that it says that he performed what was right. And right is yasha. That's right. It's translated as right. It gives us an idea that, you're walking on the right path. And this is the path of God that wants the kings to walk. And this would be the Torah way. So every time you see this, what is right, it is what is the right thing or the right uh, conduct, the right way to rule, and it would be largely understood as the way that he follows the Torah of God to do his work as a king, as a role as a king. And he did it in the eyes of God. Now, it's important because when the text tells us this, that God is watching him and he is doing what is right as God inspects his life, his work, the things that he said, the things that he did. And so this would be the things that he performed. And it was right in the eyes of God. And it says here, in accordance. Now, this word here, in accordance with, it should read as like all that. Like all that. In accordance is not quite accurate. He is saying that he did everything that his father David had done. So this would be a better way that that he did how David had done. And what did David do was to be a man after God's heart, to demonstrate that whatever God says, he will do it. And it is very important for us to realize that Hezekiah was also one that did all these. Now, there were other kings before him and kings after him, and these other kings appear not to be as great as he has been. What did he actually do? In verse 4, we are told he removed the Bama. Now, understand that I have continuously highlighted this Bama. These are private altars. Before the time of Shiloh and then uh, Jerusalem with the temple, God had allowed them to have high places across the land where they can have their own private altars to offer things to God. But when the place that God had intended, like Shiloh, where the tabernacle is to be situated, and then in Jerusalem, where the temple would have been built by Solomon, then the high places at the Bama would be illegal in that sense that God will want everyone to go to the temple, to go to the place where God has pointed. Now, you would have read also that before Hezekiah, all the kings in Judah had left the Bama alone. Now, in the northern kingdom, you would read that the kings left the sin that Jeroboam had made, like the golden calves, one in Bethel and one in Dan. And in the south, they left all the Bama. And here in verse 4, the first king after Solomon would have removed. Now, this word removed literally is cause to end. Cause to end. So he is the king that caused to end, caused to remove. And then what he did was he smashed the memorial stones to pieces. These are all the pagan idols. He cut down the Asherah trees. He crushed to pieces. Now we have this idea, the copper snake that Moses had made. In the wilderness, if you recall, God had asked Moses to make a snake of bronze. And the snake of bronze was apparently retained. And this snake of bronze was retained And when people became superstitious, they they had the idea of revering it, and they had burned incense to it, in a way, treating it like a little deity, and that was wrong. And what is important here is, for some strange reason, this bronze serpent was kept until this day of Hezekiah. And when it was there, the text tells us, for until those days, the sons of Israel had been burning incense to it. And you find that in verse 4, and then, this would be and then. Hezekiah, he called it. He called it Nehushtan. Nehushtan means something copper, meaning it's like a little derogatory term. It's like it's a piece of scrap copper to demonstrate that this piece of bronze serpent or a copper serpent is of no use. It's just a copper relic. It's fit for the museum for people to see, but it is not for people to pay reverence to. That is what this name was supposed to be. So Hezekiah called it by this name. Verse 5. This is an important description of Hezekiah. Hezekiah trusted in Jehovah, the Elohim of Israel. And after him, there was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, nor among those who came before him. So, after and before, what does that mean? It means that Hezekiah is the king here. This is that came after. And then this is the one that came before. Meaning he is a king that stood on the pinnacle. He is that king, the best of kings, if you like to call it that way. Now, what is interesting is that you find that the description here says he trusted in the Lord. This word trust is batak. Batak means to have confidence. We read this in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And that is the word translated in the English as trust. But it literally means to have confidence, meaning he knows. And so this word trust comes from the word batak. And it literally means to have confidence. And confidence means you are having a state of trust in someone for refuge and security. And this is what we call confidence. It is not abstract, it is very concrete. You literally trust in God, in this case, trust in God, have confidence in God, and not confidence in men. For example, in Achaz, here, the father, he was faced with the challenge of the northern king, who had joined forces with the king of Syria, who wanted to attack the southern kingdom. And in so doing, God gave Ahaz a sign that before the child would learn what is good and evil, that all these problems will go away. And sure enough, according to the sign, they did. But what did Ahaz do is that Ahaz did not trust God, did not seek God as refuge. He went to hook up with the king of Assyria to, to have an alliance so that there is a stronger power, and to have Assyria go and attack Syria to teach them a lesson. But little do we realize, Ahaz was under the powers of the king of Assyria. And so his trust was on men. But his son, Hezekiah, here we're told, he has confidence in Jehovah, meaning when he is faced with trouble, he trusts in God to deliver him. That is what it means by this phrase. And so before him and after him, there was no one who trusted God like Hezekiah. And of course, we read that the king of Assyria would come to attack Judah. But herein lies the summary of the character of Hezekiah. His confidence in God led him to clean up the entire land because he knows God. When you know God this way, and you place your entire confidence in God because of what he has done and from what you know of him, then you realize that you have placed all your eggs into one basket, and that basket is called Jehovah, his God. Verse 6. This is and then. And then he cleaved to the Lord. Now, this word cleave to the Lord, cling or cleaved, that would be very similar to Genesis chapter 2, where the man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. Is this the same word here? He clung to the Lord, meaning when you see Hezekiah, you see God. They are so close together that their character, the things they say and do, reflects on God. So you look at Hezekiah, Hezekiah's behavior is very much reflective of God. That is what it means. Then it goes on to say he did not desist from following him. Now, this is a very strange word that is translated this way. This word is sur. He did not turn away. Now, what does that mean? It means that he was walking straight, right? Remember? Straight. He did not turn away. That is away. He didn't do that. That is what the text actually means. When he didn't do that, so what did he do? And so this word here is, and then instead he did this. He kept God's commandments, which the Lord had commanded Moses. Now, these are the commandments that God gave to Moses, and you find that these are the mitzvot. Understand that when God made a covenant with Israel at Mount Sinai, God gave Moses a lot of instructions. And the instructions came in two forms: the mitzvah to have a culture and the mitzvah to have justice. And so in the previous chapter, you find that when the people from outside of Israel were moved into Israel, the Kuthians, who are later called the Samaritans, they didn't know the culture of the Israelites. But here we are told that Hezekiah kept. Kept means he guarded, And by guarding, he did them to know what to guard. That is what it means by kept. And then he passed it down. And so he was very careful, right? Very careful with God's commands. That is a very distinctive recognition of the life of Hezekiah. He is no ordinary king. He is said to be at the pinnacle of all kings before and after because of his loyalty to God, because of his confidence in God, because he knows the commandments of God to do them, that he knows God and fears God. That's what verse 6 is trying to say. Without having to say he feared God, we are here to understand by these actions that he made, he feared God, trusted God, cleaved to God. He walked straight, he didn't turn away. He was very careful with God's commandments. God gave it to Moses and Moses to the rest of the children of Israel. We read in verse 7 then, and then God was with him. Now, you find that this is a very interesting passage, this word here. This word was with him is Immanuel. And then here it is Jehovah. So verse 7 somehow gives us a connotation that Jehovah was Immanuel or Imo. The idea here is God was with him. And the demonstration of God with him is that wherever he went, he was successful. Now, this word successful is important. This word successful is he gave him progress. I think that would be a better word to use. This word successful may mean something to us in English, but in Hebrew, it is progress. He went to do something, he achieved it. He was able to attain. And so, this is what it means by successful. God caused him to have progress. Then we are told, and then he rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. This is another characteristic. When his confidence here is with God, he rebelled against the king of Assyria, and this is A. And so B means he did not serve, he didn't do what the king of Assyria wanted him to do. And this is a demonstration of confidence in God. This is a demonstration that he is a man of his own. But however, please bear in mind in verse 7, when he revolted against the king of Assyria, you would realize that the king of Assyria isn't going to do nothing. And so we'll read about it in the second part of this chapter. In verse 8, we're told that his exploits were these. He defeated Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory from watchtower. Now, this idea of watchtower is a singular tower where people were watching to fortified cities. What does that mean? A watchtower typically means that you have a built up place as a tower, and then a single soldier would be on top. And then cities, on the other hand, would be walled up, and there would be many people on the wall. And so a city is seen by the number of people, and there are walls around it. So these are the fortified cities. Fortified cities are defended very heavily. Watchtower, on the other hand, is just a lookout point that when they see something, they would signal back. And so this is how we see they would signal back to the city itself. And that is how Hezekiah had successfully conquered the larger part of Judah. In verse 9, it says, and then in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, the king of Elah, the king of Israel. So we will note it this way. So it is the 4th year of Hezekiah. This is a very specific period of time. We have the king is Shalmaneser. The king of Assyria marched against Samaria and besieged it. We are now discussing the northern kingdom. As Shalmaneser, the king of Syria, marched against Samaria. And verse 10 says this, and then at the end of 3 years, they captured it, which would be here at the end. That would be the end of Hosea. In the 6th year of Hezekiah, and then we can say that this would be the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Israel. Samaria was captured, and that would mean the capital of the northern kingdom finally fell. Verse 11 is a repeat of chapter 17. It says, and then the king of Assyria led into exile to Assyria all of Israel to Assyria and put them in Halah and on Havor, the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. And this would be in Assyria and a bit further north. You find that the Babylonians would be the next coming. That would be south of Assyria. And then Medes would be a little in the northern part of Babylon, of Persia, and the Medes is just a neighbor. And so all these places in the Medes would be north of Assyria. And so you find that the 10 tribes, many of them had gone up there. Right? Many of them had gone up there. Verse 12, by way of review, they were all taken away because they did not hear the voice of the Lord their God. And then it says here, they violated his covenant. This word violate literally means passed over. Passed over means, in a way, ignored. Didn't care very much about the covenant that God made with them. In all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded, they would neither listen nor do. So you see this, not listen, not doing, is not obey. And that was the reason why they were taken away. God allowed them, God did not defend them and allowed the Syrian king to take over the northern kingdom. It was largely because they did not acknowledge God as God. They had pagan idols. They had Hamas. They did everything that God told them not to do. Now, in verse 13, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, that would be way out here. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah, the next king here is Sennacherib, the king of Assyria. Sennacherib is the king subsequent to Shalmaneser that conquered the northern kingdom. So Sennacherib came, marched against all the fortified cities of Judah, and seized them, took them away. And in verse 14 is where we would slowly pause to take note that the reason why it took so long because Hezekiah had rebelled against the northern king of Assyria. Assyria decided to come first, take over the northern kingdom. And when they had regrouped, they have dealt with the northern kingdom, they decided to come down to the southern kingdom. And this is the next king, Sennacherib. And they were very successful. Please bear in mind, the Assyrian army was great, big, ferocious, nothing in comparison to what uh, Hezekiah had. Obviously, Hoshea couldn't hold them back. So we read now that because Hezekiah had rebelled against the king of Assyria, and then the king of Judah sent messengers to the king of Assyria at Lachish. Lachish is a little bit southwest of Jerusalem. That means that the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, has started to take over all the major cities in Judah, with the exception of Jerusalem. And he said to the king, I have done wrong. Withdraw from me. Whatever you impose on me, I will endure. And then we read, so the king of Assyria imposed on Hezekiah, the king of Judah, the payment of 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Now we need to pause here to understand the importance of the behavior of Hezekiah. We read that Hezekiah is Yasha. He does what is right. He is Batak. He trusts and have confidence in God. No king after and no king before. He placed all his eggs into one basket called God's basket. He obeyed God and the Torah. He made sure that he cleansed the land of all the high places and all the idols. He made sure that he observed and kept the covenant of God. Now, after doing all this, we might expect he would be invincible because he has done everything that is right in the eyes of God. And then in verse 14, suddenly appears the change in the story that Hezekiah was not able to defend Judah. And verse 13 tells us that Sennacherib marched against all the walled cities in Judah and conquered them, and then came to Lachish. Lachish being a city not too far away from Jerusalem. And King Hezekiah sent word to the king. And he said this, which is not translated correctly. I have done wrong. And this word is khata. Normally, we would translate this as sin. But it should be seen as made mistake. He admits to the king of Assyria that I have sinned against you. I have made a mistake. Withdraw from me. This word is turn back. This word is shuv, like the word repent. Return, turn back from me. Go home. Go back to where you come from. Whatever you want me to give you, I will give. This is what it means. Whatever you put on me or impose upon me, I will give. This word endure means give. I will give you. It's all about money, I guess, and even in those days when the king of Assyria comes to conquer, he wants all the wealth. And that has been perennially all the stronger kingdoms that impose themselves on the weaker nations. And Judah here being the weaker nation. So, and then the king of Assyria imposed upon Hezekiah 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. understand these things, that this is understood as coins. This word, this is really coins. We call it talents, but they are in this, right? They are in this form. So even at those days, you already have coins, but it comes in the weight. A particular disc has a particular weight. And so the king of Assyria wanted silver and wanted gold. Now I want to pause here to underscore one point before we end for today. Is this: why didn't Hezekiah ask God for help? For all intents and purposes, in modern day, whenever anyone gets into trouble, they would immediately pray to God and expect a miracle to happen. Fire from heaven, perhaps, another repeat of opening the Red Sea to defeat Sennacherib. But we find that that was not the case. One of the principles of the faith of the Israelites, and in this case, the southern kingdom, who understood how God works. God is not a God that they will call on every now and then on whims and fancies to defend them. They will have to go and fight based on their knowledge and wisdom. And based on that wisdom, knowing how God works in the contrast, in the contention with the enemies, then they will know how to request of God. But that would be in the midst of their own actions and based on their own judgments. And so in this case, the judgment of Hezekiah, though he has confidence on God, he is not of the mind to ask God to send angels to defend him. But obviously, later we read that's what God did because of his confidence in God. As the story opens up, the king of Assyria thinks that he has an upper hand. The king of Assyria thinks that he can do what he wants with Hezekiah. The king of Assyria thinks that he is more powerful than the God of Israel. This is the beginnings that we can see that Hezekiah had to deal with the situation because it is pressing. And he needs to use his own wisdom and his judgment to approach things. Now, you don't find him immediately praying to God, seeking for answers. He engages with the king of Assyria, and the king of Assyria thinks that he has won the day, at least for now, has asked for the sky from Hezekiah, and hence imposed a heavy, hefty tribute in order for the king of Assyria to go back to Assyria. Now, we will then end our session here in verse 14, and we will continue tomorrow to see what happened with Hezekiah all the way to the end of chapter 18. With this, we come to the end of our session.